Hello, everyone. My name is Call, and I am a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor. And I work with men, women, and I guess couples as well, assisting them on their sexual journeys. Um, so, what I want to talk about today is this is the first video in a series of videos I'm going to be doing on astrological signs as it relates to what I would say, I call their sexual superpowers. Um, Now, the sexual superpowers are a little bit they're unique for every single sign. However, all the signs are essentially heading to the same place, which is a conscious, intentional, intuitive merger with another individual. So, in other words, the movement towards tantric experiences. So, today is Aries. Now, this applies if your ascendant, your sun, or your Mars is in Aries. And I say Mars because Mars represents in a lot of ways your instinctual sexual drive. Now, Aries has a lot of this, has lots of instinctual sexual desire because it is ruled by Mars. Now, what's Mars? So Mars is, I like to call it the planet of trial and error. And Aries is very, very, very much about trial and error. Now, this trial and error process is, it's really important to keep in mind that along the way on a trial and error process is to recognize that there's no mistakes. I mean, there's outcomes you may not desire or prefer, but the reality is that I guess the big challenge in life is to be able to move gracefully through pain, fear, and suffering, and disruptions and negative outcomes, and being able to see where the growth was. Easier said than done, of course. Now, this is obviously something that happens with maturity. So, Mars, in a lot of ways, represents the battle, the war. Now, is it the battle and the war for what? So, people say, oh, Mars is about literal war, fighting, and if you're ruled by Mars, like Aries likes to fight all the time, it's not necessarily true. This is the battle between the lower self and the higher self. So Aries can have a tendency to, as a lower form of expression, when they're functioning through the lower chakras, the lower base energy, what ends up happening is they're a bit on autopilot. So they go slamming into things, slamming into experiences, sexual experiences. Now, this can manifest a number of traits that aren't so desirable. Like one of them could be selfishness. I could see Aries on some level being kind of selfish lovers if they're not operating with a lot of consciousness. The other thing is the abundance of sex. They could have enormous amounts of sex. It's a strong sexual drive with this particular placement in the sign. So this strong sexual desire, one of the things they can do is you may have excessive sex, or if you're in a man, what it can lead to is ejaculation in excess. Hence, I go, well, the outcome of essentially ejaculating too much is you lose your potency and your vitality to some extent. And you ultimately deny yourself the ultimate expression of creativity because the sexual center is the creative center only when it transmutes. Otherwise, we end up essentially being mired in the desire to have sex. And so, what we want to do is we want to transmute that energy. And this is what Aries is, in a lot of ways, here to do. So, the uh, the other thing I should mention real quickly about excessive discharge is when somebody is excessively discharging, the yogis and the tantra folks would say that the man loses his root. Now, I've always kind of taken this to mean a number of things, but primarily one of which is so the root or your perineal area, the base, is really far away from here, which is kind of the seat of one's awareness. So when you ejaculate, you essentially lose interest in your body. You lose interest in the self sensuality that the body can bring. And so the horny feeling ends up coming up, and then a lot of men like, oh, let me get rid of that. That's uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with that. So what's really important here is that for an Aries individual is to create a pause. Create a pause. Think about that. So if you create a pause, you start to operate through a little more consciousness and a little more awareness. You you start to gain some objectivity here. So this Mars energy, which again is all about like slamming into life and about trial and error and moving into things, and again it's a planet that's actually here to spiritualize you. It's a circle with an arrow pointing upward, meaning that ultimately its goal is that movement from the lower base energies to the higher energies. Those higher energies are what bring about one of the traits of a cultivated Aries individual, which is wisdom, intuition. Otherwise, they're operating on an emotional instinct entirely, almost. So one of the things is, as an Aries individual starts to cultivate some discipline, they start to meditate more. They start to, and again, a lot of Aries people I know, they know this is essential for their life path. What ends up happening is that they start to function, that Mars starts to behave in a little bit more like Mercury. And what is Mercury? Mercury is this like, it can see the duality, the this and the that. So Mercury is like quick and it can move back and forth. And this oscillation over time grants the individual discernment. And so this discernment that one gains, that an Aries individual gains, they start to discern who is going to be their sexual partner. And this is a feeling and sensing space. So that objectivity that comes, it basically emerges the dualities. And then these individuals are essentially inspired. They're inspired and they're creative and they have rich activities and actions in life and they're very successful. But it requires that objectivity to be cultivated. It requires that the individual recognize that they're on autopilot and they're slamming into life, causing all sorts of destruction, possibly. So what else do I want to kind of say about this? So I guess that sort of progression from instinct to directed action to intuition and inspired activity, because Aries is very much about activity. I mean, these are very active individuals always. One of the things that could kind of happen along that particular pathway is a potential for celibacy here. Not like a celibacy on a permanent basis, but these individuals, like I said, once they kind of commit to something, they can kind of like dig deep into it and they can commit to like, okay, I'm going to be celibate for this amount of time and I'm going to see what this does. And as they start to see that this like power really starts to like pressurize their center channel, and that's when they become this like shining beacon, this like, again, this like creative force that's absolutely unstoppable. So what ends up happening in terms of like the sexual superpower here is intuitive choice. You bring in the correct mates. You sense the people that you can go into sexual connections in a very deep way. And not only that, but like the sex could be really creative and interesting. Lots of like fun dynamics can happen here. One of the recommendations I will make to an Aries individual, because sometimes like the Aries sexual energy, particularly if it starts to cultivate, it's a very powerful charge. One of the things is that I could see the potential for being in a rush, possibly. And what I suggest that Aries individual do is to take your time with your partner. Try touching their entire body. Give them a massage. And I know this is literally probably the advice of every person who claims to be a tantra teacher is, oh, you got to give the person a massage. It's essential. It really is. It's not necessarily a massage, but to connect with that person, make eye contact, to touch their whole body, to massage their whole body, because it will essentially slow down that fiery energy, that deep fiery energy. It will slow it down, and it'll allow you to become a more patient lover. And not only that, but again, it's not only more patient, but you're going to have a deeper sense of bonding and connection, and also less tendency perhaps to have the mind go off and wander into all these different sort of kinky realms. And again, nothing inherently wrong with that. But like I said, there's a time for play, in terms of like, entertaining fetishes and kinks and things like that. And then there's a time for really merging deeply with somebody you care about. And so that's one of the things that Aries is here to do, is to access that will and to start making choices. And as you start accessing that will and making those choices, you start to, again, have richer, deeper experiences of other individuals, of your body, and of life in general. And I guess life in a lot of ways starts to become this, deeply gratifying journey of trial and error and growth. So with all that said, I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you much.